Hi, this is our SAT vocabulary list number 16. You want to take Cornell notes as I'm going through the list, and if at any point I'm going too fast, feel free to pause the recording to catch up. But on your notes, you want to write the word, the part of speech, the definition, and anything I say, any examples or visuals that might help you remember what these words mean. The first word is accumulate. It is a verb, and it means to become greater in quantity or number. People tend to accumulate knickknacks over the course of their lives. Investigators will accumulate evidence in a case. So it's whenever you're getting a greater number of something. And a lot of people have hobbies where they accumulate things like baseball cards. I remember when I was young, it was like the cool thing to do was to accumulate garbage pail kid cards. So there's all kinds of different things that people collect, they accumulate, getting a larger number of them. The second word is antiquate. And antiquate is a verb. It means to make old or to make something out of date. You'll also hear the word antiquated, which is an adjective. So if something is described as antiquated, it means it is old or it is out of date. But when you think about all the technology, how quickly it's changing, so when the next iPhone is released, it will antiquate the previous model, right? It's going to make it old, it's going to make it out of date, even though an iPhone is still a relatively new technology. Each model will antiquate the one before it. And if you look at the definition, and even this old Remington typewriter reminds me of it, think of antique, which starts almost the exact same way. So antiquate and antique, everybody thinks of stuff that's old when you think of antiques, but antiquate, antique, it might be a word association that helps you remember what antiquate means. But so for example, even though this looks super antiquated, the Remington typewriter actually made previous forms of, like for the printing press or other ways of, typing or, putting your writing into kind of text, it would antiquate those previous forms of kind of producing typed writing. 3 is concur. And to concur, it's a verb. It means to agree. So if you concur with someone's opinion, you agree with their opinion. You guys see eye to eye on the topic. So concur means to agree with someone else, their ideology, their statement, whatever it is that they have said. 4 is abjure, and it's a verb, and it means to reject something, maybe to renounce something, to like push it away. And so when you think of abjure, you might think of kind of taking away your allegiance to something, your loyalty. Maybe you previously agreed with something and now you abjure, you kind of reject it, you have a new kind of philosophy or a new way of thinking. So in high school, if a friend betrays you, maybe that's a situation where you think of, okay, I'm going to abjure, I'm going to reject that friendship, I'm not going to be friends with that person anymore. And I think when I think of political parties and particularly different aspects of a singular political party. So in the United States, we have Republicans, we have Democrats, and most of the other political parties don't get very much play in our political party, so we tend to think of it as a two-party system. But even within, say, the Republican Party, there are different groups like the Tea Party and that are more conservative, and then there's more moderate Republicans who might agree with Democrats on some things, but they might abjure other things. They might reject other things. So thinking about any kind of rejection or renouncing of maybe a previous relationship, a previous way of thinking. Garrulous is an adjective, and it describes someone usually who's given to constant talking, and not just talking, but very trivial talking. So you're doing a lot of talking, but you're not doing a lot of talking about anything of substance. So thinking about someone who just kind of chats all the time, almost just to hear their voices, their own sound of their own voice. My daughter, I love her. She is garrulous sometimes. She talks just to talk. She literally pops out of the bed in the morning talking or singing. And so if you think about like the saying, this person is a chatty Cathy, then it might help you remember what the word garrulous means. So it describes someone who's like that. And one of my big pet peeves, now that everyone carries phones and everybody's on the phone, is when you get a real garrulous person around you, like in public, at the grocery store, or somewhere where you just don't think of having a really long, chatty, unsubstantive conversation, and they're just kind of walking around in everybody else's business, but they're talking to somebody on the other line, but they're not talking about anything important. They're just, they're just chatting, or it's very trivial. And so you're kind of wondering, like, hey, why do you need to have this conversation in the grocery store or before the movie begins or wherever it might be? 6 is influential. It should remind you of the word influence, right? An influence, someone who's a good influence on you, has a good impact. So influential describes something or someone that has the power to sway the will, the actions of another. And usually, if someone's very influential in your life, this word has really a lot of positive connotations. So if we have a good influence, if a parent has been really influential in our lives, we tend to think of that as a pretty positive thing, meaning that maybe they've shaped us, they've helped us grow into the people that we are today. So families can be very influential because they really do have a big impact on, how we live our lives, the kind of people that we become. 7 is lenient, and lenient is the opposite. It is the antonym of harsh. So if you think of a parent who's extremely strict, extremely harsh, if you look at the totally opposite end of the spectrum, on the other side would be a very lenient parent. Someone who is very relaxed. They just, maybe you don't do what you're supposed to do, but they're probably not going to get up in your face and yell at you and punish you. They tend to be more relaxed, more lenient. So lenient is not harsh or relaxed or easygoing. So a parent who's extremely lenient might be fine playing video games with their child whenever, right? So, oh, you can do your homework later. That's something a lenient parent might say. Or, you've done a great job this week. Let's just sit on the couch and play video games, right? Like those words would never come out of my mouth. 8 is nondescript. And something that is described as nondescript is indistinguishable or dull or unremarkable. There's nothing about it that really stands out. So if something's nondescript, it doesn't have a lot of character. It doesn't provoke a lot of interest. It's just kind of maybe bland, kind of blends in with everything else. So sometimes when people meet me for a second time and they don't recognize me, I wonder if maybe I appeared kind of nondescript. There was nothing about the way that I looked that stood out that would help them to remember who I was. This is a great example of a nondescript building, right? If I drove by this building, I probably would never remember it. Like I have no idea what this building would even be used for because it is so nondescript. It's like gray, there's no signs on it, there's no indication of what this building is used for. 9 is preposterous, and something that's preposterous is utterly ridiculous or so absurd, it's almost hard to believe. So when you describe something as preposterous, like if someone tells you a story about their weekend and your reaction is, I can't believe that happened, you might consider that story preposterous. Like I can't believe that was real. So before Lady Gaga came on the music scene, if someone said that a performer, a musician, were going to arrive to something like the Academy Awards or the Grammys in an enormous egg, which she did, I would think that's preposterous. Who would ever do that? You know who would do that? Lady Gaga would do that, right? If someone told me that Miley Cyrus with her beautiful hair would shave it all off and have some crazy hairdo and dance the way she did at the VMAs, I would have said that was preposterous. But in the world of music, anything can happen. 10 is reminiscent. And something that is reminiscent, it describes something that kind of pertains to a collection of matters or a personal interest. This is kind of a challenging definition. Some of these SAT definitions are not super helpful. So what might be more helpful is to think of the word reminisce. When you reminisce, you remember stuff. You think about things that happened before. When you clean out the garage and you're looking through photographs, you're reminiscing about things that happened in the past. So to be reminiscent, it reminds you of a particular time, which instead of maybe a recollection of matters, you think about a time period or a personal interest or some accomplishment. You could, you reminisce about, it would be reminiscent of a particular time in your life. So thinking about looking through old photographs and how they might be reminiscent of when you were young and you were with your family. So think of reminisce, the verb form, and then try to kind of remember reminiscent. Shrewd, someone who is described as shrewd is very keen, right? They're characterized by skill, and their skill is that they're able to kind of understand and profit, to kind of gain from certain circumstances. So people who are shrewd, they know how to find a good bargain. So like this lady, she's clearly going to do some shopping and she wants the best bang for her buck. She is being shrewd. She's looking at the back of the boxes. She's comparing them. She's using that skill, understanding the difference between the profits, what she's getting for what she's going to pay. And she is hoping to profit or gain, getting the best deal because she's so shrewd. 12 is surmise, and surmise is a verb. And to surmise is to think or to infer something without strong evidence, without being sure that you're right. Sometimes surmise is used as a guess, but usually it's an educated guess. So you might read something in a novel, you might see something happening, and you don't know exactly what happened or what the meaning was, but you're able to surmise, you're able to infer, you're able to make some guesses about what happened based on what you read or what you saw or the little bit of kind of the clues or the evidence that's there. So a lot of times when I'm asking you to talk about the novel that you're reading, I want you to kind of surmise what the meaning based on the information available. And sometimes that's not a lot of information. And a lot of us, when we're taking a standardized exam, we might feel totally clueless and lost. We might have to surmise an answer. It feels a little bit like a guess because we're not certain if we're correct. We don't have a lot to go on. 13 is an ultimatum, and almost everybody has probably had an ultimatum presented to them at one point or another. It is a noun, and it is basically a final statement or proposal where if you don't do this, then this is going to happen. So, if you're in a relationship and you really want the relationship to move forward, maybe you say, okay, you have till this date to commit, where we're only going to date each other, or we're going to move in together, or I want to be married in the next 4 months, or whatever the situation may be. Gentlemen, you'll probably get an ultimatum at some point from some lady in your life. And parents give their children ultimatums all the time, right? If you don't clean your room, you're not going out this weekend. That's an ultimatum. It's a final statement or proposal as concerning some terms or conditions. If you want to go out, you have to do this. And then the very last word is calumny, okay? Calumny. This is one where the pronunciation, you want to make sure you get it right. Calumny is a noun, and it's an attempt to spoil someone else's reputation by spreading lies. So it's kind of a juicy word, but calumny is it's kind of like gossip, and it's gossip intended to harm. So when you hear someone say something about someone else that you know is not true, and it's really going to harm their reputation, that's calumny, right? So this is a word that in the high school context actually has a lot of relevance. And here's two pictures, or a picture of two women, and that one's kind of telling a secret to the other one. The other one looks a little shocked, almost like disbelieving that they can't believe this statement is true. Might be an example of calumny. And the last word is tumult, and it's a noun. And it's a great commotion, a crowd, disorder, kind of chaos. Oftentimes, a tumult will come with some kind of like sound connotations with it as well. But it's really the commotion, the chaos, a crowd, some kind of disorder. And so, some kind of a mob or a protest gone wrong would be a great example of a tumult.